Richard and Gary, thank you so much for bringing this film to Dock and Roll, yet another UK premiere, and an amazing film really, very heavy on one level, but an astonishing story really. I didn't know very much about Thomas Hansen and his music, so I suppose I'm going to first of all ask, how did you first come into contact with the work of St Thomas and Thomas Hansen's songs, his music, his life?
Well, I guess you weren't as aware of him as I was to start off with. I mean, I've been a fan of his music for like quite a few years, and I guess we've been working on like a couple of other short doco kind of style things together, which hadn't quite come to fruition. And at that point, we were looking for another project to take on, and I think I was looking around in a record shop in London to see if he'd released anything recently, and couldn't find anything. Went online, I had a look, and then saw that he was dead. And I think I said to you, kind of, you know, I read a little bit about him, and we got in touch with the record label, and we spoke to some guys there, and they were kind of like, really receptive to us coming over and chatting about perhaps doing a documentary about him. But at that stage, we didn't really know that much about him. We didn't know any of the kind of mental health tangents to do with it. And we went over thinking that maybe it'd be like just a kind of short form thing that we could do for a while. But when we got over there and we visited a few people, and like Espen and the guys there, we went over and like, I mean, everything was shot kind of really lo-fi and DIY, and we had no budget for this at all. So we went over with like some DSLRs and kind of went around, met some people they knew, and did like a bunch of interviews. And once we started actually talking to people, we realised that there's this kind of like, quite beautiful story underneath it all, but perhaps especially in the way that it was like refracted through other people's memories of him. So once we kind of started doing that, we thought, there's something here which should be a longer form thing. So
how did you get on in approaching Thomas's family and also the band members as well? Because you can see in the film what emotion there is and how difficult it is to talk about working with Thomas and actually living with Thomas because of his ongoing mental health problems and how that affected him on stage. So how willing were people to talk to you?
To start off with, I mean, it is mixed to start off with. I think they'd had initially some kind of fairly negative experiences with some of the Norwegian tabloid press. So they were a little bit wary about where we were coming from when we started it. I know there's a few people, weren't there?
There's a couple of people in there who were quite adamant at first, on the first email, you've got to give me a reason to open up about my time in my life. Bussel, who's in there, who plays the banjo, bald-headed guy. He's a good close friend of Thomas, but he at the end sort of says 95% Thomas was good, but 5% was, unbearable kind of thing. And he memorably, I remember his email coming back saying, you've got to give me a really good reason to even talk about this, because I don't want to go there, because I think he probably suffered in similar ways, and he felt a lot of that trouble, and he was quite hurt by Thomas at times, I think. That was an example of one of them, but the family and stuff, everyone was so warm. In general, I think.
Generally everybody was really positive about doing it, but initially there was some kind of questions that we had to answer about what our angle was.
Motives and maybe stuff.
And also at that stage, were you still kind of discovering exactly how the movie was going to turn out, how the documentary was going to turn out? So that made that a bit more difficult to communicate that.
I mean, we kind of rambled our way through it, really. I mean, we didn't know that much about him, and there wasn't that much written about him, so it was really on a kind of case-by-case basis. We met people, we just travelled around Norway on public transport with some crappy cameras and cheap lights and bad microphones, and kind of met people, and I had long interviews and conversations with them, kind of like for 4 or 5 hours into the night, and that's where it became an interesting project to us, I guess, because it became more about, in a lot of ways, it became more about the people that are around him rather than Thomas himself. Because I mean, he was always, something which is, he's always an unknown quantity to an extent. So it was always him refracted through other people's memories of him. So it became, perhaps in some ways a lot more about them and like kind of vignettes of these individuals kind of based around him in some ways.
And also trying to place that together, piece that with the beautiful music as well, which is so honest and descriptive, the authenticity of Thomas. It's almost, I'm working with a theatre director at the moment. We've just done an interview where she's talked about the way that people with mental health issues or creatives trying to find an outlet and a way to actually describe what they're going through about themselves. But it's plainly obvious in Thomas's music that he's describing the events that happen, the thoughts, the feelings.
Definitely, there's kind of, that's we always want to get more. We want to get more of the music in than we could in the end, because like so much of it was like so diaristic about his life and how he was feeling in those kind of very kind of precise moments, and
both the good and the bad as well. You'd have
definitely.
Equally in the edit. You probably found that there was for upbeat moments, there's a song for every kind of mood and feel for everything as well. It's not just the sad points and the down times where he's when he's feeling upbeat. There's a song for it. Which made it good for the soundtrack. I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of one thing we'd always say, because I mean, Racing Genie, his old label, releasing kind of an unfinished album they had done, which were kind of demos effectively. At the same time in Norway, when we did the screening there, they released that album then. And those albums are so raw and so personal as him kind of sitting and just saying how he's feeling. It's like so diaristic. You in a way we'd like to have got more of that in there. In a way you got rid of kind of like the more well-known tracks for stuff which is more personal, but to an extent you hope that people then go out and like perhaps listen to those songs and it gives some context to it, which is
quite a lot of footage. I'm quite interested by the footage in the film. There's the personal video footage, but also some of that footage around about the time of the tour to England, to the Royal Albert Hall. Where were you able to find or acquire that footage from?
There's a couple of people we have to thank for this. There's one guy who was a sort of journalist or a student filmmaker at the time. He studied in England, and it was a journalist in Norway who filmed the footage in Royal Albert Hall. He kind of came later on, and that was only probably a couple of years ago. We had an email saying I found the box, and he sent it over at Christmas time, and we had this box of 25 tapes, and Royal Albert Hall footage was on there and things.
We were halfway through it.
So that was like we were expected to be finished and thought the film was almost done, and then we received all these tapes.
How do you feel that helps, having that footage there, actually seeing Thomas on stage going through some of those emotions and the pressures off stage as well, battling the anxiety, battling the depression and the addictions? I
mean, it's difficult in a way because you're obviously quite led by what footage you have, and like when we started off, there's kind of like quite different structure to it, which because it's purely based on interviews that were shot. Then when you get more archive fed into that, it obviously kind of means you have to accommodate that. But it's difficult because a whole bulk of the archive that we had in there was shot by people that, when he was having a moment where he was like particularly angry or upset or something like that, they'd turn the camera off and move it away. So you can't ever really kind of show those moments because everyone would turn the camera off. So it's difficult. It's difficult to an extent.
That's
you kind
the
of have to
problem
move away.
with Radar. There was two people. There's the first guy who said well, and the second guy was it was a fan pretty much who then followed Thomas around and filmed him. And that was one of the first things we got was a hard drive of 90 hours of recorded footage. But because he was almost so close to Thomas that sometimes he definitely turned the camera off at that point where almost he'd want to sit. But I think through other people and other recordings, it came out eventually.
But again, even with the footage you have, is still kind of, I kind of felt as I was going through it all, you kind of, he's still kind of a really unknowable kind of quantity, because you're seeing him secondhand through these kind of glimpses through the archive, and it's, the only way that you can present him is through other people's perspectives. So that's kind of, I guess, for me, what became kind of, as important about it was a kind of film about his family and his friends and his parents.
I have to really ask the same question I asked Bruce Spiegel earlier this afternoon in the Bill Evans documentary. Do you really feel, having made this film, that you know more about St. Thomas, about Thomas Hanson?
No, well, I mean, obviously more in a
about the man himself.
Not about the man
himself.
I think that's one of those things. I think with kind of documentaries about somebody who's not around anymore. It's that they're always going to be unknowable. So you can see them through these kind of small snapshots that you've got. But the only way that you can really understand them is through other people's perspectives, and that becomes quite difficult because you're only getting kind of one angle through it. And the one thing that we really didn't want to do at any point was give it some kind of editorialized journalistic slant on who he was. So in some ways it becomes a bit rambling, and I always when we started doing it, I always said it's not somebody who's kind of self-destructive, like throwing themselves off a cliff. It's somebody who's born on the side of a steep hill, who's kind of tumbling down through that, and that's kind of what the film became in a way. It became kind of tumbling down through his life, I guess, maybe.
But I guess you do show that right the way through the film, that there's these elements of being eccentricity, being a bit of a rebel when he's younger. So some of the kind of things coming out in various different ways. I mean, it's very difficult. It's difficult to kind of, especially with mental health problems, it's difficult to kind of delineate where the man stops and the illness begins. So, I mean, we didn't want it to be a kind of pop psychology answer to how he was, in a way. It's much more nuanced than that, I think. And I think it was like two things. We didn't want it to be a pop psychology answer to kind of his mental health problems, and we didn't want it to be a kind of glorification of rock and roll excess, and it could have gone down either of those. So it was we were kind of quite
it's important
wary
to get him in there as well, and I think feedback we had so far, I think it's important to hear that Thomas was part of it. I mean, when we initially had this assembled, it was all people talking about Thomas, and slowly we started to bring this archival footage in there, and Thomas's lyrics and Thomas on stage, to bring his voice in there, so he was almost like a narrator of the whole film as well, as much as anyone else. And that was important because I think when we initially had it, it was people talking about Thomas, and then it was a big thing that we always spoke about, that Thomas should be as part of this as well, and the songs were and songs led everything else. So.
Well, I mean, we'd kind of always wanted, and I think we could perhaps say more, but to an extent it was Thomas's lyrics were always kind of his perspective on things that were happening from beyond the grave to kind of we can try fish on it, but I mean, we wanted to, I mean, it's quite difficult because his music, and especially a lot of the stuff which wasn't recorded, he released, or he recorded a huge amount of stuff, like hundreds and hundreds of songs like that we had access to, and it's that's his version of events really, and you kind of hope that people go back to it and listen to those songs like in their entirety, because that explains his perspective on his life really, and it's a shame you couldn't have got more of that.
I appreciate his songs more than ever. After getting to know everyone else, and you see the context of where it was at. You listen to the songs again, you listen to
Yeah,
any
because
album,
it is
it
context,
puts it in
yeah.
context with everything else. But
Do you hope that's one of the points of getting the film out there as well? That it's not only about Thomas itself, but
Yeah.
about the music
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
and about his voice.
Yeah,
Fantastic
Yeah.
voice.
yeah, amazing voice. I mean, really kind of like tremulous, kind of
Yeah.
that kind of fragility to it, you know, where it's about to break at any point, and that nerve, I think people have described it as in Norway, but there is something, you know, quite beautiful about it. And you know, I remember kind of early on with some reviews, he was kind of, it was like people were comparing him to a kind of, that he was trying to rip off Neil Young or something like that. But the fact he hadn't even heard Neil Young till he was like kind of 2 albums in or something.
Yeah.
But there is something kind of like a beautiful kind of fragility to that voice.
Because we should mention, I mean, I noticed that about the link to Neil Young, the kind of sort of link there. Elliott Smith as well. We had
Yeah.
Elliott Smith's film at
Yeah,
Dock and
yeah.
Roll last year.
Yeah.
So again, these
A lot of
links.
parallels.
Yes,
Yeah.
form of the music,
Yeah.
the vocals, even the voice to a degree.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is a Q&A, and if anybody would like to ask Richard and Gary a question, I wonder how you felt about the film and how you felt the producers and director here handle the film and handle the subject.
First, thanks for the film. That was great. I've loved St Thomas's music since I was 13,
Wow.
and a really special experience for me to see this. I just was wondering if you could explain about, there was sort of a gap in the film between when he was about 6 years old and about 23.
Yeah.
Was there a lack of archive footage, a lack of things to say, or was it just not really?
Just a lack of an extra hour for
Well,
you to
there's a
probably as
lack.
well.
Yeah, there's a lack of archive, but also we made it quite. I mean, initially we'd had a kind of sprawling 4-hour cut, which
I'll come to that if you show.
yeah gave
Yeah.
which
That
gave
exists,
a lot
it
of
exists.
gave a lot of time to that period of his life, which is you know really interesting. I mean, we've been trying to get time to kind of get an extras DVD out for the DVD release, because so much of that stuff is like so important to why he did
Yeah.
the things he did and who he was.
The guy the reason he's called
Yeah.
St. Thomas was a guy, Philip Ring, who when he was playing in the band beforehand, we had a whole section in the film beforehand where he went to Bergen to go to university, and he studied, formed this band, and he played in this band called Emily Lang and things, and that was part of the film before. And then he went to Kristiansand for a summer and met this guy called Philip Ring. He's a great artist on his own, really interesting guy. He's probably our second favourite.
Yeah, he was
One of
great,
our second,
wasn't he?
one
he
of our
was brilliant.
favourite interviewees.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And it got to the point where the film was just too long.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
Rich saying, "We've got to cut him. We've
yeah.
got to just take this section out. It just doesn't make sense. We've got to kind of get to the point a bit quicker." And it wasn't easy, but
No, and
there's so many people in that whole world which are.
and it was quite difficult because also we kind of said at the beginning that we're going to do it in a kind of very linear, straightforward way, just because as much as anything, kind of Thomas's worldview was in like such a kind of childlike, simplistic way. We said like let's just tell it in a kind of very linear, this happened, kind of children's storybook kind of way, and it just became too much to fit in really at the end of the day. But that stuff's all out there, and it's really interesting. Like kind of tried out for the military and kind of some of these stories which are amazing.
Yeah, it was a great story about trying out to the military. What happened? His parents told us this story of and then he pretended not
guy
to.
up, didn't he?
No,
For something?
there was a story where he in a hole like this, and and he had to pretend to be stupid or pretend to be not not fit to be able to do it. So he got out of military service, which then allowed him to go to university, and so it's a big point of his life, I guess. In some ways, it could have turned out very different, but it's. And then there was a postman. We didn't even get the postman story in there, which all the journalists at the time picked up on the singing postman. He was a postman.
Yeah.
So many aspects, though, aren't there?
That's on
and as you say, with the amount of footage, and then being able to edit that into a film that is, you feel, gives that detail, gives the story.
Yeah.
But as you say, 4 hours, you're probably.
Probably asking a bit too much.
There you go. Well, I don't know. Dock and Roll audience are quite dedicated here. So, Any more questions from the audience? Any questions about the film, or maybe if you're a fan of St Thomas?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you feel he was he driven to? I mean, he appeared to me to be quite self-destructive, but do you think he was driven to that, or was that something that was in him anyway? Do you think?
No, I kind of, like as I was saying earlier, it's that whole thing about it not being don't think it's a self-destructive urge. I mean, I think press and noise specifically kind of presented him as being a kind of cliched self-destructive rock and roll star, but I don't think he was. I mean, the drugs and everything else I think was really a way of coping with his various mental health problems, and the fact that he had massive social anxiety issues and yet chose a profession where he went out on stage and had to confront that every night as a way of kind of perhaps explaining himself. I guess that was his aim, wasn't it? It was to explain himself to other people through a wider medium. So I think if we've done anything with it, I mean, I'd like to think that we kind of address something which is that he wasn't that kind of cliche.
Yeah, I think that's quite important about talking about the mental health issues, because again at the moment, as I say, I'm working with a number of people, I have worked with a number of people, again one of my radio colleagues this year that I've been helping through extreme anxiety in the same way as Thomas had to go out on stage, but yet you have a talent, and to a degree it's quite interesting because when he's there on stage there are clips there where he does look quite in control, and he does look quite confident, so but that kind of sense of having to control to be able to get, but in terms of the mental health issues that you're dealing with, again as we said earlier, how do you deal with those sensitively, and what are you hoping to get across now to a wider audience of people about the issue of people who have anxiety, social disorders? I mean, does Thomas serve as kind of example to say, well, look, these issues are prevalent? What about the educational side?
Well, I think certainly in terms of the fact that he was very open and honest about his mental health issues. I think that was it's quite an important thing. I know a lot of the fans of his music kind of relate to him because they face similar problems, and it is something which gets brushed under the carpet a little bit. I remember Klaus, who's one of his record label guys, kind of saying to us, which I think we got in the film, like if he had a broken leg or something like that, you could say to people, he's got a broken leg, he can't walk, it's a way of explaining it, but it was very difficult to explain to people that he was mentally ill, and the reason that he did things he did and the reasons he reacted in the way he did was because he had a mental health issue. And I think everybody knows somebody who's got, or had mental health issues, or knows somebody who's been affected by that. I mean, I know a bunch of friends who've been affected by it in the past. And I think it is still, stigmatised to some extent. And I think it's, quite an important thing to say that it's, okay to speak out about that and be open about it. And it's no more shameful than it is to have a physical problem.
Yeah, as you say, it's not very visible, although please note in the film how honest he is, particularly when he has these spells of aggression on stage, where he will go up to the microphone and say, look, I'm sorry.
Right.
But,
exactly.
But, I mean, what did you feel about that? Did you feel that's brave? Did you feel that was really great that he was able to express that?
I think it's commendable that someone can stand up in Royal Albert Hall and be so honest to say, this is what's happening. And
I mean, that's always something that there's always interest us for this, that kind of that aspect of authenticity. It's the fact that he got up and told it the way it was, and his songs were very authentic in terms of him expressing a genuine human emotion, or being very diaristic about his life as it was. So I think to some extent that's quite a heroic thing to do, to kind of be open in front of media scrutiny. I think that's quite a brave thing to do, and I think he did that. I think he kind of paid the price for it in some respects, but Yeah, I think
Well,
definitely.
Espen says at some point, actually outside the interview, Espen, who wears the Celtic shirt, is probably what I think the star of the film in some ways.
Well,
Most
he's
of the
been
comments.
close at hand, isn't he?
He's
Really,
been
for a
there
long
throughout the whole
time.
thing,
Yeah.
and he says sort of pretty much every Norwegian artist these days talks about the feelings, and that was never a case. No one ever said. I think it opens the whole issue on probably Scandinavian culture and stuff, and how people express themselves, and if you open up and do say how you actually feel and things, and that's a whole other world that it's probably too complex to get into. But I think.
I mean, especially
definitely picks up on
Norwegian
that.
culture has, or Norwegian society seems to have a lot of, issues with mental health problems, perhaps more than anywhere else,
Yep.
and whatever the reason behind that is. But yeah, a lot of people we spoke to during this process all had mental health problems. A lot of people we interviewed had mental health problems. So I think,
Yep.
in terms of Norway, it's even more valid.
Yeah.
There's still an educational process going on here, and I'll have a
Yeah.
chat to you about one film festival I'm working with at the moment, where I'm watching this film this evening. I'm saying, well, I think we've got a venue that's actually interested, and I think to me just the educational aspect, as well as the fact that you're watching actually a bloody good musician.
Hopefully that's
Yeah.
what people appreciate if they weren't aware of his music, and someone stumbles across this on the other side of it, the mental health angle, and sees it for the educational point, and can stumble across it and find a kind of artist that they haven't heard before.
Quick note about the fact you had a Kickstarter campaign as well, and that you were able to gather the finance. What was the process of making the film like then? How long in total did it take, and was the Kickstarter kind of quite important there in being able to keep the project rolling?
Well, yeah, to an extent. I mean, it was kind of over 5 years we've worked on it, but it was in our spare time. So it's, both working alongside this. So it was kind of like when we had time, we'd return to it and come back. So it was, a fairly painful process. But we'd always, when we started this, we said it's going to be a kind of DIY experiment in whether you can, for no money or effectively, kind of very little budget, dry tobacco and pocket lint, kind of make a feature-length documentary. So, the production value isn't the highest. We went around Norway with some cheap equipment and videoed people, and Kickstarter gave us, we got about $6,000, like $6,000 from Kickstarter, which helped. I've got to say we kind of, spent kind of quite a sizable amount of that on an editor at some point, which it didn't work out with, at which point we kind of clawed it back and edited it ourselves. So, it's, as much as anything, it was an experiment to see if you can do that, with pretty much your own budget, your own funding, and your own
Well,
time.
I was going to say, what about a bit of context about other projects that you've worked on, guys? Is this your first music documentary?
It's the first
one finished.
feature. Yeah, I mean we started a couple of other things which didn't work out, and I come from a kind of art direction, kind of music promo kind of background, and have kind of worked doing kind of directing ads and stuff like that, and I've always come from a background where I've had more money to kind of spend on polishing things. So with this, like,
very
to start off with,
short
it was,
time, lots of money, whereas now not very much money and quite.
So I found this, at some points I found it really difficult, because I'd be kind of saying, well, it looks shit. What are we going to do with this? It's like, well, there's nothing we can do.
I found that quite problematic.
I'm
used to kind of having, working on a 30-second.
I found that
ad
quite
or something.
problematic, because I'm used to kind of having,
20 times
working on a
budget
30-second
for what we've had for the whole thing.
ad or something.
So I found it really difficult
20 times
with,
the budget for what we've had for the whole
working
thing.
around down, working with
so I
something
found it really
that was
difficult,
quite
kind
rough
of,
and raw, and
working around down, working with something that was
but at the end of
quite
the day,
rough
we
and
kind
raw
of-
and
it's
still low budget.
matters if
But
we can,
at the end of the day, we kind of both
get the
said,
story out
it's the
there,
story
that's the
that
thing.
matters if we
You are,
can,
you've delivered it.
get the story out.
I
there,
just
that's
wonder
the
if
main
there's
thing.
any more
Yeah.
questions. You've delivered it here
before
with
we
you
wrap up.
Yeah.
I just wonder if there's any more questions before we wrap up. Yes.
It was a very beautiful film. Thank you very much. And I was just wondering whether they had any influence on the editing or the shaping and how they might use it or how they got involved?
No. Yeah, no, not at all. They got involved because it was after Thomas died, they released a box set, like a tribute box set, an album and kind of DVD package thing, which was really nice, and they sold it all around Norway. It was really, really impressive, and the proceeds of all that went down to a foundation, which then they used to promote various mental health causes, and particularly teenage kind of problems and stuff. And they had a little bit of funding left, a little pot of money afterwards, and Thomas's parents sort of said to us, they were part of this fund, and they said speak to these guys. We've got this money. If you need anything, go there. And so that's why their name's on there. They gave us a little bit of money, and that was it. They were really good. They sort of said, "Here, make the film you want to make." But they've been involved. They were in the premiere in Bergen and in Oslo. Really supportive. We're in talks with them on what we can do on like an educational side of things and put it out there to. They're quite interested in putting it into schools or play it on their kind of broadcasting, kind of NRK, which is a national broadcaster, and I think they see a lot of scope for it and pushing it out in that way. But they certainly didn't influence the way it went or anything. But it's very helpful.
And that leads me to the question, where has the film appeared yet? So you've had the Norwegian premiere, you've had the UK premiere here, but where else has the film been, and where are you planning to take it over the next period of time?
That's it so far. This is the first one outside of Norway. So we had the world premiere in Bergen in sort of late September, which was the world premiere at their film festival there. And then we had a big screening, which was where he first started his music, which we were keen with. All along we said if we could premiere anywhere, that's where it should be, because it's where he first started his music and stuff. And then we went to Oslo, had a huge screening there actually, which was really amazing. We had full bands playing beforehand, all these old bandmates playing and stuff. It was amazing. And then there's been sort of screenings around Norway since, and it's released there, and it's on DVD, and people can buy it and download. So it's it's been amazing. But this is the first one outside of Norway. So
and is it too early yet to think about a DVD release or online streaming? Is that something that might need more funding? Or?
In this country?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Where's Rich? Yeah, he's gone. That's a good question. I mean, our problem is now is trying to get people to watch the film. I think in Norway we had the advantage that there was a fan base there of people who wanted to see a film about this guy that they grew up with. Whereas here it's a bit more, we don't have that in the same way, but it's trying to build that interest and trying to get people to watch the film first, and hopefully once they watch it, they'll realise that it's not about Thomas as such. It's about the people around him and about people in this situation. So I like to think that in a few months we'll have a better idea. I think it'll be in a few more festivals in the UK, and then it'll be on, people will be able to download and DVDs and stuff. So.
Well, documentaries and music documentaries, particularly through this festival being so popular these days, Gary, then it's it's got to be a good chance.
Well, hopefully, we're happy just as long as people can watch the film and we can get it into as many people as possible. That'd be great. So.
Yeah, sorry, Richard. We're
Sorry
just
about
talking
that.
about
Don't drink beer. We have a Q&A.
just before the call, the nature was just talking about streaming and DVD possibilities, and what are the plans in the future. So Gary's been talking about that. Can you add anything? Do you feel that in the UK there might be DVD or streaming release at any point?
Yeah, I mean there will be. I mean it's been a little bit of a harder sell in the UK than it was in Norway, because there's obviously a fan base there and people are, still aware of who he was. In the UK, he's kind of drifted into obscurity a little bit. So, yeah, it's been a bit more difficult trying to get any press for it over here, hasn't it? I mean, we've got a feature in Uncut magazine this month. So
we can have a radio interview.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
Brilliant. But yeah, it's difficult because you know, he's not an established artist which you can trade off that name. So it's been a bit of an uphill struggle, and we've kind of held off on the release here until I think kind of the new year when we'll release it streaming here. I mean, in Norway it's done kind of fairly well so far. I mean, it's kind of DVD and streaming release there, and a whole bunch of good reviews and write-ups in like the press there. So it's been great, but it's, you know, obviously more of a struggle to get it out anywhere where they're not so aware of who he was.
Yeah. Any other projects lined up as the making of a long-form film?
Yeah.
Is that inspiring you to do something, or Richard? Is it back to the adverts, the 30-second highly priced
I don't
adverts?
know. I wouldn't want to start this
still a
again.
DVD to sort of this of the extras,
Yeah.
and there's so much more that we've still got to do with this. I think it's hard to.
I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, you know, I kind of go into I kind of go and occasionally lecture in a kind of the art school for their film course in Norwich, and you know, I think the thing that's kind of as much as anything that should be kind of inspirational about it is that you can go out and you can shoot stuff with you know, cheap consumer grade kit, and you know, easily, you know, make a feature-length documentary or a film or anything now. And that's something when I was younger that, you know, I wish that was around then, you know, when I had the time and didn't have a family and everything else, you know. And like, you know, I'm quite envious now when I go in there and the kids today here, like, go out and like just, you know, make something, you know, off their own back. It's, you know, really easy to do. So, yeah, I mean, for us it was an experiment to see if we could do it. But yeah, never do it again with the kind of like the budget that we had.
But this festival is all about instigators, innovators, and the DIY element. I mean, Thomas Hansen's own work, looking at somebody who's very DIY, but in a really positive, really great way. So I suppose you're following on from his inspiration.
Yeah, that's good.
Hopefully the ramshackleness of it kind of you know, relates.
But it is a good story. It's a solid story, and again, it works on so many levels about his music. I'm going to go and get some of his albums now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we always kind of wanted it to be kind of quite humanist, you know, perspective on him, you know, and on, you know, people with mental health issues, and you know, people who kind of have to live with people who have mental health problems as much as anything as family and friends, you know, and that's what was, you know, important. Hopefully that comes across.
Well, it's a fantastic film, Burn the Place You Hide, and we're so glad at Dock and Roll to have had it as yet another premiere, UK premiere. So Richard and Gary, thank you very much. Give them a big hand.